Okay, we are here for our HGG meeting for September 19th. I'm excited about today. I have mixed feelings about our woman for today. So if you guys don't know, we are coming from the book She Speaks. And this book is Wisdom from the Women of the Bible to the Modern Day Black Woman. It's by Michelle Clark Jenkins. Every week this year, we have been studying a different woman of the Bible. There are 52 women in here. There are 52 weeks in a year. No, there are actually 50 women in here. There are 52 weeks in a year. We've skipped a week, gone a week, done a couple of things, but yet and still, this is where we have been coming from this year. This has been our guide. And this week, our woman is the virtuous woman. She does not have an official name, but she is considered the virtuous woman of the Bible based on Proverbs 31. And that is going to be found in verses 10 through 31. So Proverbs 31, the beginning, verse 1 through 10, is actually a mother speaking to her son. And then when you get, verse 1 through 9 is a mother speaking to her son. And then once you get to chapter 10, you get the epilogue, which is considered the virtuous woman. Now, I'll be very honest with you. I have always had a battle and a love-hate relationship with the virtuous woman. My personal feelings, don't judge me, go judge somebody else because I ain't the one. But I've had a very push and pull relationship with her because when you read what the virtuous woman represents, and I'm going to read the whole thing in a moment, it is very overwhelming. So typically, I have you guys read it yourself, but I'm going to go through because when I was doing my studying of this, I went verse by verse, and I was like, dang. So I'm going to read. It starts off Proverbs again, 31, chapter 31, verse 10, and it goes to verse 31, and it says, "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts in her, so that he will have no lack of gain. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. She is like a merchant, like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night and gives food to her household and a portion to her maidens. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hand, she plants vineyard. She clothes herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good. Her candle does not go out by night. She lays her hand to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretches out her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches for her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her households are clothed with scarlet. She makes herself covering of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates, and when he sits among the elders of the land, she makes fine linen and sells it and delivers sashes to the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing, and she will rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the teaching of kindness. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed. Her husband also calls her and he praises her. Many daughters have done virtuously, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her all the fruit of her hands and let her own works praise her in the gates." Now, baby, it's a lot. It's a whole lot. So I'm going to break this down as I was going verse by verse, and then we're going to talk about some of the things we can learn and take away from these scriptures. So it starts off with a question. And when I first thought about this, I looked at the question and I was like, is this a question like a rhetorical question, like who could find her because she doesn't exist? Or who can find her because she does exist? And how many of us actually have those qualities? So it's allowing what I was at when I was looking at this is like allowing God to work through us in all ways. So it starts off, and I was taking this as she knows her worth. So in verse 11, it says that verse 11 states, the heart of her husband safely trusts in her. And so when I was reading verse 11 and verse 12, her value begins with her husband. And for those who are married or those who have a desire to become married, before it mentions anything else, it brings up what happens with her husband. And I thought that was really significant because it goes on to talk about all those things, but her husband is mentioned several times within this. I'm reading the MEV version. It goes on several times to talk about her husband. And I'm like, you're talking about the virtuous woman, but you keep bringing up her husband. And for me, it just showed the significance that within marriage, how important in a unity the husband is to the wife. And in this instance, it's like his adoration of his wife is what actually brought her more value, because sometimes you could be married to somebody and you just be married to them and they don't even value you. So the fact that it starts off saying that her husband valued her before anything else is mentioned was important about her children, her job, or anything. It's the value that she even presented to her husband, that her worth in essence, for all intents and purposes, as it starts off, is based on what she is able to provide to her husband, which it says is she does him good and not evil, and that he has safety within her. Somebody said, she said, are you talking about Sarah Jake's book? Me? No, I think she was talking about what version am I reading of the Bible. Let me know in the chat if I'm right or wrong about that. But that she brings safety and value to him. So that's in verses 11 and 12. Yeah, what version of the Bible? So the MEV. So that was important to me because I was like, dang, before it goes and talks about anything else, it brings up that part for her. Then in verse 13, it says, she also rises while it is yet night and gives food to her household and a portion to her maidens. Now, this was the part that where I be having a love-hate with her, because I'm like, so everybody else gets to sleep and she got to get up early and make sure everybody eats. And my thing with the virtuous woman is I was like, I don't see nothing about self-care in here. So does that mean living a soft life and having self-care is not virtuous? Because if so, I don't really know if I want to sign up to be the Proverbs 31. No, it's okay. You don't have to apologize. Yeah, so I don't know, because waking up early and making sure everybody else okay every day, that's a little extensive for me. Okay? Again, don't judge me, judge somebody else. Verse 14 goes on and says, she is like the merchant ships and she brings food from afar. So when I was reading this part, I'm like, okay, she makes sure that her family has what I am taking in is it's not just your local stuff. So she's making sure that she's keeping things different. She ain't feeding them the same thing. They ain't having spaghetti and tacos every week. They eating different stuff. She's making sure that she's keeping her family even cultured from how I took this. And we usually think like things that are coming from afar, that's not cheap. So she's making sure that she's giving quality to what she's feeding her family. And then she doesn't want her family to have the basic stuff. She's like, no, we gonna spice this up a little bit. Then in verse 15, it goes on to say that was verse 15. I'm sorry. It says she rises while it is yet night and gives food to her household. So I skipped a verse. I'm sorry. Verse 13 was she seeks wool and flax and works willingly with her hands. So she has a job for herself, and she makes sure that even in the midst of all of everything else that she's doing, that she's still providing for her family. Then verse 15 was the one that I said I got a problem with, because I'm like, she's not living the soft life, and self-care is not a part of what she's doing. And I got a problem with that. I want the virtuous woman to have a spa day. Verse 16 goes on and says that she considers the field and buys it, and she, with the fruits of her hand, she plants a vineyard. So when I was reading this part, I'm like, okay, she's wise with her money, because to be able to see a vineyard and say that I want it, like put my name on it, that's mine, I'm gonna go get it. It shows that she has her own money. And it didn't say that she even consulted with her husband about it. It didn't say, which means that there is a trust between them in their relationship. So she knows that he trusts that whatever she's going to do with the money that she has or that they have together is going to be something that is going to profit their family. And then it says she plants the vineyard with her own hands. Again, I'm like, well, she couldn't hire somebody to do that, but the virtuous woman is a 10 out of 10. She's going to go above and beyond. She's going to make sure that them vineyards was planted properly. And then she also understood how to invest and tend the ground. So in her being able to buy the land and also tend to the land is important. So I'm going to take that as into our own households. So we can buy the house, but can we also tend to the house? Can we also make sure that the things within our house need to be done? Not saying that you can't hire somebody to do it. Not saying you can't hire a maid or you can't hire somebody to do your meals. Not saying you don't have somebody come in and help you care for your children, but can you do it yourself? Because it did say that she had maidens. So we know that she does have people that are helping her along the way. So don't discredit having to do everything because that's what you quote unquote think that the virtuous woman has to do, because that's not how it goes. Verse 17 says, she clothed herself with strength and strengthens her arms. And then I took that as she kept herself in good shape and in good health, that she made sure that her mind and her body were healthy, because if she's strengthening her arms, working in a vineyard, that's going to strengthen your arms, that she definitely was doing something to be able to keep herself in shape. And then in verse 18, she's prepared, because it says that her lamp, her candle does not go out by night. And so she's prepared for the night to come. She's not going to be caught idle. She's not going to be caught not having what she needs for her family, because we see that she always makes sure that her family is intact and okay. Verse 19 talks about her making the clothes. So she's planting the vineyard. She's making the clothes. She's doing all the things. In verse 20, she gives to the poor and the needy, because she operates from a spirit of overflow and abundance. And this was very important to me, because I think a lot of times we discredit that. And I know in the times that we're in now, you could barely stop at a corner without somebody asking you for money. Anytime you go into a store, a lot of times, depending on where you go, there's somebody asking you for money. So there are always people around us who are in need, and we cannot help everybody. That's not the expectation. But I think that it is important to still understand that part of giving to the poor, like that is important, giving to those who are in need. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be somebody that you see that's unhoused on the street. It can be a friend. It could be somebody that God places on your heart. Sometimes God places on my heart just to send people within my contacts a Cash App. So one of my friends, I just sent her Cash App. I was like, hey, I know that you got a lot going on right now. Go buy some coffee. Go buy lunch so you don't have to worry about making yourself lunch. Sometimes those little things that you do for people go a long way. And I didn't even know that when I sent that money to somebody, like it was going to mean so much to her, but she was so grateful for that because she felt like somebody thought about me. So it doesn't even always have to be a financial need. It could be a text message. It could be a phone call. Just letting somebody know that you are thinking of them can be a need that you don't even know that you're meeting for them. So I don't want us to look at it from a financial standpoint, although that is important because it says to give to the poor. But when I saw to give to those who are in need, to understand that need is not always financial. It could be when you gather your clothes and they're got tags on them or barely worn or something like that, giving that over to a person who's in need. If you have a child, when your child outgrows their clothes, not just tossing them away, but giving it to somebody who may need it, sending it to a shelter or giving it to a single mother or a family that doesn't have the financial resources to be able to buy clothes for all those kids. So their kids, like those are things that you can do that go a long way. The other part is, in verse 21, it says, she is not afraid of the snow for her household, for her households are clothed with scarlet. So it shows that, she is prepared. And sometimes I think that we go into situations or seasons being unprepared. One thing I want us to take away from the virtuous woman is that to be prepared in all situations. People talk about me all the time because I'm always overly prepared. If there is ever an earthquake, a flood, a fire, come to my house because I got everything. Being unprepared is a scary feeling for me. Part of it also, I have to always check myself because I have to understand that it's a part of me trying to be in control over everything. At the beginning of this year, we talked about the women in the Bible and how a lot of them operated from a sense of wanting to have control. So I have to understand that where is the line between me being prepared and me wanting to have full control? Because if I have full control, that means that God does not have control and I need him to be in control. So I have to walk that fine line between preparedness and control. Then we go on to verse 22. It says that she makes herself coverings of tapestry she makes herself coverings of tapestry, and her clothing is silk and purple. And so this just again shows that her overflow and abundance and her wealth, because if you wore purple in that day and silk, those were considered, that's a color of royalty, and the silk was a fine fabric. So those weren't things that just regular everyday people had access to, because in order to have something purple, there was a special dye that had to be put into the fabric, and that dye was a very expensive dye. So if you had that dye on your clothes and that you wore purple, people knew that you came from a wealthy place and a place of royalty. The same thing with silk. Silk was a very expensive, and I know even silk nowadays, depending on what you have, silk can be considered a very expensive fabric. And so to be able to know that she was in silk and purple, just is like, again, it's overflowing abundance for her. Then we go on to verse 23. It says, her husband is known in the gates, and he sits among the elders of the land. So her husband is also wise, and he's notable. So she just don't have a husband who has no respect within the community. She has a husband who is respected. Verse 24 goes on and says, she makes fine linen and sells it and delivers sashes to the merchants. So she's working, she's crafty, she's adding to her household, she's bringing value. And this is why I believe that she not only depended on her husband for finances, but she also had the finances herself, because she wasn't sitting idly. And it goes on to talk about idleness a little bit later on. And then it says in verse 25, strength and honor are her clothing, and she will rejoice in the time to come. She is known and celebrated with victory. That's what I got from that verse. In verse 26, it says, she opens her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the teaching of kindness. So she is not quick to, like, she's not the queen of petty. She's not going to do something to tear somebody down. She knows how to speak wisely. She knows when there's a time to talk and there's a time to be quiet. She understands that there's a time to give advice and there's a time not to. There's a time to give your opinion and there's a time not to. She understands how to use her words to build people up and not to tear them down. I took this also as she's not a woman who's always complaining about what's going on. And what I had to realize even about myself is that sometimes we complain so much or complain so nonchalantly that we don't even realize what we're doing. So if somebody's like, oh, how you doing? Oh, girl, I'm tired. It's been a long day. Like, you don't realize that that's a complaint coming out of your mouth. And what God had to reveal to me when I had to check myself and repent for that myself is that this is what kept the Israelites wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years. And the Bible says that they were murmuring and complaining. So take an account of the words that you're speaking and the way that you're, even if it's something so simple, of how you're using your words, because every word that comes out of your mouth should have value. You should be using your words to create the life that you want, to build up the people around you, to speak life into other people, to speak life into yourself. Your words should not just be idly used or used as a casual thing. So I've been really honestly trying to work on this even within myself. And I'm not saying I'm perfect at it and I have it down, because I have to catch myself. So if I am feeling like somebody's like, oh, how are you doing? How are you tired? And I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm doing well. I'm ready to go take a nap or something. I try to find a way to say things to where I'm not murmuring and complaining. I'm trying to make sure that every time I speak and everything that comes out of my mouth is going to be something that is going to bring somebody closer to God and not push them away. Because when people see you, sometimes, like it's said all the time, but you are the Bible that people are reading. So although we have all these books in the Bible, sometimes your life is the Bible that somebody is reading. It is the book in the Bible that somebody's going to see. So they're going to be like, oh, she's a Christian. I know she has a good walk with God. I know that she has a relationship with God, but she always complaining. She always got something going on. She always tired. She always talking about she don't have no money. If those are the things that you're putting out there, that is how you are representing God. And although God does not need us to be his I don't want to say not be his spokesperson, but although God's reputation is God's reputation, he doesn't need us to diminish his reputation in any way. So that's what I got from that verse. Here we are now on verse 27. It says, she looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. So again, that's why I said she keeps busy. Now, one thing I did put when I read this part is I was like, but if her keeping busy, like, is that a good thing? Like, is she taking time for herself? Again, sometimes, well, it's a saying, it's not biblical, but the older people would always say, an idle mind is the devil's playground. So I'm like, okay, well, she's keeping herself busy, but I really wanted to know, like, does she have the time to be able to decompress? Does she have the time to really sit and spend that time with God? Does she have that time to sit in quietness? Because she's not idle. Verse 28 says, her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. So this goes back to that she's honored by her husband and her children. And I want to believe that it's not just because of what she provides for them, but just because of who she is. Because again, it starts off at the very beginning talking about how she provides a sense of security and safety for her husband and how she covers him. So that's what she has to be doing for her children as well. So that is why they are rising up and calling her blessed. Verse 29 states, many daughters have done virtuously, but you excel them all. So she's not just doing the regular stuff. She's going above and beyond. And we see that in all the different things that she's doing. Verse 30 says, charm is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. And with this, again, we know that beauty is only skin deep. These are these sayings that you hear forever, that you don't judge a book by its cover, because a person could be drop dead gorgeous, a dime, 10 out of 10, all of the things, and be raggedy on the inside. So not to judge somebody by how they look, but by how they treat people. One thing that was said during Woman Evolved that I've always told people is I always pay attention to how people treat servers or waitresses, however you want to call it, or hostesses. If I go to a hotel, the clerks, I always pay attention to how people treat them, because if someone can treat a server wrong or treat someone, housekeeping or something like that, and I can't be around people like that. That's in a friendship, that's in a dating relationship. It doesn't work for me, because I don't discredit anyone for what their job is. I don't discredit anyone for what their salary is. I don't discredit anyone or treat them as if they're less than if they're serving me, because I feel like to be a server is an honor, and it is definitely something that it takes a certain skill set to do. And for those who truly do it with grace, I honor them for someone to be able to serve me. And I always make sure I give reverence and respect to that. And I think the thing that TDJ said is pay attention to how people treat people that can't do anything for them or something like that. So I've always had the saying that I will treat the CEO the same way I will treat the person who's cleaning the bathrooms in the building. Because at the end of the day, we are all human beings. We're all people. So someone's job description, someone's salary, someone's social status does not give them any more grace in the kingdom of God. For me, just because we're all children of God. Now, if you rude to me, I don't care who you are, CEO or thing, I might have to check you. Pray for me, because I'm still working on that. But for someone who just comes to drop off something or place something on the table or clean up, I'm always saying thank you. I always say please. I always try to treat them with the utmost respect, because you don't know how often those people are not treated with kindness. And I've had people say like, oh, you're so nice. And again, not because I want them to do anything extra for me, but sometimes that goes a long way for somebody, especially if they're having a bad day. Or if the person right before you, or the person who was at a table next to you, was not kind. Being kind to people costs you nothing. So that's what I got from that. Then verse 31, give her the fruit of her hands and let her own works praise her in the gates. And again, she is respected, not just within her household, but she's respected within her city gates because of who she is. And the fruits of her hand, again, we don't judge a tree by the tree, we judge the tree by the fruit on the tree. So as you see, she's giving off, she has fruit. The fruits of her labor are coming to pass. So your tree is going to go deeply rooted. Those are the seeds that you have, though, and she's planted many seeds. So what seeds are you planted that are going to take deep root and bear fruit? That is what matters at the end of the day. Your purpose, your gifts, the things that you are called to, the people that you are serving, what seeds are taking root and bearing fruit? So that's what I got from this. I'm going to stop this recording and we're going to start up the next one. Hold on one second.